Now, an online survey conducted by the University of Johannesburg and the Human Sciences Research Council, that's the HSRC, has found that 53% of adults who were surveyed actually feel that schools should not reopen until the COVID-19 infection rate is drastically decreased. Now, the survey was conducted between the 30th of December 2020 and the 6th of January this year, with more than 10,000 people participating. Now, it clearly indicates that although parents are deeply concerned about their children's education, they are equally, if not more, worried about their children's safety. Professor Narnia Bohler-Muller, who is the Divisional Executive of the Developmental, Capable and Ethical State at the Human Sciences Research Council, joins us now to talk to us about this survey. Professor, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Can we just start by just taking a look at the target participant for this particular survey and also basically where it was conducted?
Okay, so because of COVID, it was an online survey, although we usually, as the HSRC, do fieldwork surveys. And we use a platform which is data-free called Moya Messenger. And there are 4 million users on Moya Messenger and about 2 million active users. So we use that platform predominantly for the survey, but we've also run the survey on all the social media as well as via WhatsApp. So we reached a lot of people. As you say, we have a sample size of over 10,000, but it's also generally representative of the population because of the fact that we use Stats SA data to weight the survey. So you could say that this is basically representative of South African adults over the age of 18.
And now, Professor, what actually motivated this particular question, if I may ask?
Well, the survey's been going since the beginning of lockdown. So we've been going through all the various levels of lockdown. And we first asked the question in sort of June of last year. And we found that it was a very good idea to do so because at that time there was a hot debate about schools and the complete opening schools or the partial reopening of schools. And obviously, it was very important now because we could see the second wave starting. And we realized that there would be some issues with the reopening of schools because of the second wave, but also because there's a new variant of this particular virus called 105V2, which is more easily disseminated amongst the population. And it also affects young people more. So there were very many factors that made us realize that we needed to find out from ordinary people how they felt about the reopening of schools and also then advise government and the Department of Basic Education about these findings.
So were these, the responses, did you find this to be surprising or were you expecting it to basically pan out the way it did?
I think it was sort of a similar situation to the previous because the first wave was then also with us. But, you know, maybe we were quite surprised about it because the debate has always been that it's essential for schools to reopen. But we also understood that there's inequality in the schooling system. So for wealthier parents in South Africa, they feel comfortable sending their children to school. The infrastructure is good, the resources are there. But with the poor, the situation is completely different. And poor parents are far more concerned about their children going to school during the pandemic. And yeah, it seems to be quite logical in a sense that we had these findings. And we also found that race was an issue, with Indian people in South Africa being the most opposed to the reopening of schools at 77%. And there was a 40% 50% difference between Indian parents and white parents. White parents are living in suburbs mostly, are far more willing to have the schools reopen and have the school year continue.
And that's very interesting. The other two racial demographic groups represented, what was the finding there?
63% of colored adult parents and 53% of black adult parents. So you can see there's quite a jump and a difference in the race groups.
Indeed, which is very interesting. Professor, did the survey actually make provision for people to give their reasons for why they felt schools should not reopen? I know we've looked at the increase in infection rate as one of the issues being cited, but was there room for people to actually give their reasons?
We didn't ask an open-ended question specifically about schools, but with the survey that we've done so far, we have a question, an open-ended question, which is called Messages to the President, where people can send messages to President Ramaphosa about their concerns. And in these messages, it was very clear that parents are worried about the safety of their children, but they're also worried about teachers. So teachers have been infected and numerous teachers have died over the last 3 months or so, I think 1,600 teachers. So the risk is there and people are aware of the risk. So some of these messages were about schools. Some of them were very strongly in favor of, and that was mainly from wealthy suburban whites, very much in favor of the schools reopening. But of course, a lot of caution from the other race groups, and those were the main reasons.
And to that point, from the information that you did manage to gather, was there any indication as to some of the issues that people are faced with, perhaps in poorer households, as to why they were concerned about sending their children back besides the infection rate? Things like childcare, school lunches, for example. Did that come through at all, Professor?
Well, the school lunch issue is interesting because that was one of the pressing issues from last year as well. But the court has found that the school feeding program should continue, even if children are not going to schools. So people would go and queue in an orderly manner with social distancing and wearing masks to fetch the food from the schools. And it seemed to work very well. So I don't think that was a particularly pressing issue. But of course, with poorer parents, perhaps they are concerned about their children traveling to school because public transport is used, as well as the teachers from the poorer schools also use public transport. And of course, you're at a far greater risk if that's the case than if you're driving your child to school in a car. And, you know, in some of the schools in the townships and informal settlements, there's inadequate water. So the washing of hands and soap, so the washing of hands and cleanliness is an issue. And these are all factors that have influenced people, as well as this new strain that seems to be giving us a lot of problems. We saw that we went to a very high level of daily infections. We dropped a bit, but we're going up again. So I don't think that we can be complacent. In addition, experts have been saying that we should be cautious. So Professor Karim, who heads up the COVID-19 Ministerial Advisory Committee, as well as Dr. Gray, have said that it's better to be cautious because it's very disruptive if we open schools, we see an increase in infections, and then we close them again. So the recommendation to the National Corona Command Council was to open the schools on the 15th of February, and the minister will be making that announcement, as you mentioned, at about 9 o'clock today.
Indeed, and we are, keeping an eye on that and hoping that it will actually take place because, with everything going on, very often we hear that these meetings have been postponed for one reason or another. So I think everybody very anxious to hear exactly what the department will announce. But Professor, given everything that you've told us, as part of the participants in this particular survey, did you perhaps target teachers specifically to get their views as well?
No, it was not a targeted survey. It was an open survey, but we did get responses from teachers who also sent messages to the president. And I think it's reflective of what the teachers' unions in South Africa are saying, that there is a concern amongst teachers about infection and dissemination of the virus and the vulnerability of learners now that we have the new the new variant of the virus. So, no, we didn't target. It was a survey that was a random sample online, but it was very clear that what the teachers' unions are saying is generally reflective of what teachers themselves are thinking and feeling.
Well, very interesting. And of course, we do know that the Command Council has now, made this proposal. So hence we're waiting to hear what the department is going to say. So it is clear that your survey findings have been taken on board. But just out of curiosity, how often do you do surveys? Have you done surveys during this coronavirus pandemic? And, how often do you interact with the council?
We actually don't interact directly with the council. I think they're very busy and we're not on any of the task teams, but we are a science council in South Africa, so it's our responsibility to provide evidence to governments. So we put the evidence out there and we hope very much that it is taken into consideration. And because of the outcome of both last year and this year, it does appear that the voices of people are taken seriously. So experts are listened to as well as the ordinary man or woman on the street. And it's important for us to do that because we live in a participatory democracy. We need to know how people feel. And this is an effective way of doing it. So we've been running the survey, as I mentioned, from April of last year right through the lockdown. And we have had certain phases or rounds of the survey, but it has had been relatively consistent from April through to December, or at least at the beginning of January. And so we have longitudinal data to look at, and it's very, very informative evidence and data and information that we have. And we have a number of other questions that we've asked, and one of them is about vaccines. So we will be releasing that data next week.
And we'll hope to speak to you about that. I was under the impression that you actually do send it directly to them. So I don't know, that was just in my mind. But we'll talk again, hopefully next week, about the vaccines, because that's, of course, the next big one, Professor. But for today, thank you so much for your time and for just talking to us about this particular survey. Professor Narnia Bohler-Muller from the HSRC, and we were talking about the survey that was conducted by the University of Johannesburg, which indicates that 53% of adults feel that schools should not reopen. And as she said, they put out the scientific evidence as per the survey that they have conducted, and the National Command Council does pay attention. Obviously, we saw the proposal, and hence our question of the day as well, talking about what you make of the National Corona Command Council's recommendation to delay the reopening of schools. And you heard there from Professor Bohler-Muller, their survey also bore that out, that parents were a bit apprehensive about sending their children back right now.
All right, let's have a look and see what you've had to say. Rise Up Movement. Morning, ladies. It's the best decision.